prosecution of Ms. Mangione. I think what investigators are trying to lock down right now, if they are able to, is some sort of motive. But the most important thing at this point is really processing and evaluating and putting into a timeline all of the available evidence. And that includes the forensic evidence that's been collected by the investigators. They still have to process a lot of the items and evidence that they have in order to put into this timeline, which will eventually lead to a successful prosecution. As long as you can create kind of this linear, logical fact pattern, which gives a jury an opportunity to analyze and think in a linear fashion, you'll tend to be more successful. But that's what they're doing right now.
Mark, just wondering, like, United Healthcare says that Mangione was never insured by them. What could this tell us about motive?
You know, motive is very tricky and oftentimes can be a very subjective thing. I think from an investigative standpoint, identifying a motive is completely incidental to really effectively collecting and gathering and analyzing available evidence itself. The prosecutors will tell you motive is not necessary in order for a conviction. It's something that they like to have. But from an investigative standpoint, we really treat motive as incidental to it. Sometimes motive jumps out at you and it's clear and obvious. Other times it is more difficult to really assess. And one of the pitfalls of focusing or directing your attentions and efforts on establishing a motive is there are shifting scenarios. And this is a classic case here. You know, some people will jump out and conclude that the motive may be related to a rejected health claim. And then you find out, well, no, that may not be the situation. So you find yourself kind of following and chasing the motive, and that shouldn't happen. The motive really is incidental to the collection of actual factual evidence.
Yeah, and Valerie, meanwhile, we're waiting on the Manhattan District Attorney to file his indictment against Mangione. When could that happen, and what happens next?
Jose, well, that would be the next big key development in this case as far as the New York portion goes. New York Governor Kathy Hochul indicating that she expects that indictment to be handed down any day now, but we still have not gotten a clear timeline for when that might happen. In the meantime, Mangione's attorney continues to fight his extradition, yesterday filing a petition essentially contesting his detention here. There are a couple of court hearings set for later in the month, December 23rd and December 30th, although Governor Hochul indicating she is working with authorities here in Pennsylvania in hopes of expediting that extradition process. Jose?
And Mark, the NYPD says they still don't know exactly how Mangione obtained the gun that was allegedly used in the shooting. These ghost guns are difficult to trace. I mean, if they were printed, part of the gun was printed. How do you track information like that down?
Very challenging when you're talking about these ghost guns and whether or not they were, like, whether or not this particular weapon was made on one of those 3D printers or was purchased as one of these kits. It's still very difficult to trace down because there is no serial number attached to the frame itself. So it really is a difficult thing to track down for the investigators, which is why a lot of times, and you'll find this across the nation, a lot of legislators are really pushing towards increased penalties for even the production of these quote-unquote ghost guns, if you will. So there has to be a heavier enforcement in regards to it because you cannot trace their origins effectively and efficiently. You know, they really are ghosts, and that makes these investigations especially challenging if you really necessarily need to find to establish a timeline of the firearm itself.
And Mark, were you surprised at all, or that it took 5 days to identify this guy? I mean, that one picture of him at the hostel, right, where he lowered his mask, it seems as though it didn't take any calls from friends and family members to identify him. It took those two people in McDonald's to do that. Are you surprised by that?
Not really. I'll tell you, these investigations have a process of their own a lot of times. Every investigation is unique and different. and the available evidence makes some things more challenging than other things. But I think what's happened is we've become kind of groomed by the sensationalization of a lot of these programs which require a certain time frame to conclude these cases, and that's just not the reality of it. And you conclude them any way you can conclude them, whether that comes from you identifying, as an investigator, identifying the perpetrator, or information coming from the public, which is, quite frankly, the most common way that these kind of cases are solved. So, no, the timeline didn't disturb me at all.
Valerie Castro and Mark Claxton, thank you both so very much. Really appreciate it. Still ahead, as Syria emerges from 60 years of a family-run dictatorship, we'll talk about the path towards its future, what came out from the latest American diplomatic efforts, and we'll also speak with a Syrian activist. And in 90 seconds, even more reports of possibly drones in the night skies over the Northeast. Up next, we'll talk to one New Jersey mayor who's seen them himself and is frustrated by the lack of answers.
This smacks of a lack of control, and that makes people very uncomfortable.
Download the MSNBC app now at msnbc.com/app.
Ten past the hour. None of those mysterious and oftentimes very large flying objects spotted in the skies along the East Coast since mid-November, sometimes even hovering near sensitive airspace above airports and military facilities. Lawmakers in Washington are now demanding answers, while the White House is downplaying the sightings.
We have not been able to, and neither have state or local law enforcement authorities, corroborate any of the reported visual sightings. To the contrary, upon review of available imagery, it appears that many of the reported sightings are actually manned aircraft that are being operated lawfully.
Joining us now, Marquise Francis. Marquise, good to see you. When there is so little information, oftentimes from official sources, it creates an opportunity for a lot of theories and a lot of confusion. What are officials saying today?
Yeah, that's right, Jose. There's so much confusion, right? We just heard that sound from White House National Security Comms Advisor John Kirby, and in that presser yesterday, he said these drones are not a national security threat. He said even though the U.S. government does not have their own firsthand imagery, the imagery that they have been able to federally analyze shows this is not a threat to the American people. And they also said this is not from a foreign country. But of course, this has done nothing to quell the anxieties of people and lawmakers in and around the state of New Jersey. What we do know is these drones are not hobbyist kind of drones, the kind of drones that people send up into the sky to get aerial views of nature or sporting event. These are commercial grade drones, anywhere from between 6 feet and the size of a small car, up in the air for hours at a time. And when local law enforcement has sent their own drones up into the sky to kind of get a picture of what these drones are, these commercial-grade drones have been able to elude people. And this month, 21 New Jersey mayors have sent a letter to the state asking for more answers. And of course, we have state officials asking for answers from the federal government. And so there's just a lot of questions going around and not enough answers. And of course, John Kirby said this investigation is ongoing and he's asking for some patience. He's saying this is at the beginning of the investigation, not the end. And of course, this has been something that has been kind of ratcheting up online for a bit, but things took another turn this Wednesday when a Republican lawmaker actually went on Fox News and said these commercial grade drones are actually from the Iranian motherland or motherboard. And that has not been corroborated at all. And the State Department said they're actually rejecting that theory. And so, of course, when you have so many more questions than answers, this is where you get that anxiety from, Jose.
Yeah, Marquise Francis, thank you so very much. And joining us now, Mayor Sam Morris of Mine Hill Township, New Jersey, one of the communities experiencing these sightings. Mayor, it's great seeing you. I thank you for your time. You know, we were showing some of the, the pictures and videos that you took just this week of these flying objects over Mine Hill Township. What do you think is behind this? Because some of the, not the ones you picked up on, but I've seen some of the other ones that could well indeed be landing lights changing from an airplane as it approaches an airport. What is it that you think they are?
Well, I've put on my Facebook this morning that the governor and Mr. Kirby have a little bit of a point, which is people, in the absence of any information, people are filling in the blanks. And people are probably about 50% or 60% of the sightings most likely are small aircraft. Some of them could be jets going into Newark, going into Teterboro, going into different places. Even we get traffic here for the New York, airports. But what I think is going on is I think somebody's trying to show off. You know, I've said this numerous places. If you wanted to be stealthy and if you were up to something and you were trying to do something malicious, you're going to come in about 3 o'clock in the morning in the dark with no lights on your drone, and you're going to do something. These drones come out about 4:30, 5 o'clock during the evening rush hour, and they generally have been staying up till about 11. The state police said that that's generally the time they see that these things go away. There was one I saw myself 2 days ago at 5:15 in the morning. And I think somebody is out there trying to draw attention to something. I've said before, if they wanted to hurt us, they would. I don't think it's necessarily nefarious, but it's definitely got people upset.
And it's definitely out there. In other words, you're really, according, what you have seen, it's not, I mean, as you say, some may be airplanes or jets or small, airplanes, but there are also large drones?
Yeah, there are. So one of the easiest way to tell drones is aircraft generally have 4 lights, right? Two forward and aft and left and right. Usually they're red and blue and a pair of white lights. Sometimes they have landing headlights on, and you can see those if it's foggy or misty. The thing with the drones is they have lights that are in a different pattern. They're flat, they're 4 or 5, 6 to the side. Drones have red and green lights that alternate. The back of an airplane sometimes has 4 or 6 white lights, and that does get people's attention. But then you also hear the engine noise, which trails behind a plane just a little bit. So those are, hey, you think it might be something, and then you hear the engine noise, and you know it's a plane. The drones come across, and people have reported hearing some whirring sounds, like a small fan or something, but generally they don't make a sound. You don't really hear them or know they're up there. You just see them.